Good morning. One of the things that I've been amazed by since living in the Bay Area is the dedication of Raider fans. Even I, as a kid, remember that when they moved to Los Angeles, they left the Bay Area. And yet, some years back, when they were still in Los Angeles, you would see in the airports on Sundays, Raider fans going to and from Los Angeles. And even vice versa, for that matter, when they came back up here, people from Los Angeles were coming up. I used to travel with the Metropolitan, and it never ever failed. In the Bay Area, if you were traveling on a Sunday, there were Raiders fans in the airport. One would think that after they moved a second time, that the fan base would finally just say, you know, I'm done with this. And yet, amongst my in-laws and friends that we've made and people in the parish, I still hear people say, how are the Raiders doing this weekend? Who are they playing? What is this? What is that? And you see Raider stuff everywhere still. I feel bad for you guys, honestly. I apologize. At some point, you have to say that in the relationship, you need to spend time with me. But anyway, I can't claim to ever having grown up being a Raiders fan. There was a rivalry with the Seahawks in the 80s with the Raiders. But nevertheless, there is actually one Raiders player that I actually really like, and that is their quarterback, Derek Carr. Interestingly enough, he ended up on the NFL's top 100 players, which was just a list that was revealed a couple of weeks ago, and it's voted on by the players, and Carr was, amongst a couple of other Raiders, was on this list. And when they were interviewing him for these accolades, you know, they were asking him a little bit about his childhood and about his life and his career. And one of the things that he said was, every level of football I ever played, if the game was on a Sunday, I didn't go. My parents would not let me go because my parents took us to church. And even despite the fact that he has ended up in the NFL, he still, to the best of his abilities, goes to church and tries to encourage this with other people. Apparently, Carr comes from a long lineage of pastors, of like people who were in ministry in various Protestant denominations. And actually, he used to go, when the Raiders were still here, he used to go to some Bible church in Dublin, I believe, I want to say. I don't remember the name of it, but someone pointed it out to me once. Sorry? Brave Church. Okay, I knew it was one of those kind of catchy one-word names. But in any case, his family growing up made this a priority. And they said, essentially what they were saying, instead of seeking the glory of the gridiron on Sunday, I'm going to seek the glory that is the cross. He traded essentially one glory for another. And despite, again, having become very successful in the NFL, making hundreds of millions of dollars now, he essentially was telling the interviewer, if my family could do it, you guys can do it once in a while as well, he was saying, very interestingly enough. Human beings seek glory in very many places, I think. I think that it's anywhere you look, whether it's sports or anything, wealth, social status, whatever it might be. We seek glory. We seek glory. And even athletes do too, right? Are there ever times in our lives, however, brothers and sisters, when we are seeking some kind of a higher thing, a higher status, some kind of a higher symbol or some kind of glory, and we actually feel like we have anything but? We do not have glory. We find glory nowhere that we think we might find it. St. Paul talked about this a little bit today in his letter. And he mentions people who were seeking glory in places that really they weren't going to find any. Essentially, he's talking about various false leaders coming into these early Christian communities and essentially boasting amongst themselves about accolades they felt they had received within their faith. How many people they had converted, how many places they'd gone to, etc., etc. And they were looking for glory within this religion for themselves. And St. Paul also knew, by the way, it wasn't just them, it was many people. All human beings, of course, seek something greater. And there were all kinds of problems in these early Christian communities as well. There were all kinds of problems of how people mix together, how one combines Judaism with this new religion of Christianity, the persecution by the Romans, the occupation in these areas by a hostile force. There was lots of different problems, and the people were seeking, sometimes very aimlessly and in places that were wrong, as St. Paul says. And so what is Paul's answer to this tribulation? What is Paul's response to where we seek glory? He says, far be it from me, he says, to glory except in the cross of our Lord Jesus Christ. In other words, I personally am not looking for glory, he said. I'm not looking for personal accolades. I'm not looking for someone else to give me some kind of status, he says. The only place, St. Paul says, I'm going to glory is in the cross. The cross of our Lord Jesus Christ, he says. And the church puts this reading today because it is the Sunday before the feast of the Holy Cross. Now, one might look at this and say, well, gosh, how can one say that the cross is glory for an individual? What does St. Paul mean, we might be tempted to ask? How can he glory in the cross? What does he mean by this? And it wasn't just this time that he said it many, many times in the epistles, and the fathers of the church talked about it a lot. St. John Chrysostom, with regards to just this point, says, what is the boast of the cross? He says, that Christ for my sake took on him the form of a slave and bore his sufferings for me, the slave, the enemy, the unfeeling one, Chrysostom says. He even so loved me as to give himself up to a curse for me. In other words, what Jesus Christ has done and continues to do is for you and me, brothers and sisters. It is not just kind of some big theological concept or something that's over here or something in the past. It is for all of us for all time, all of us individually. Everything that Jesus did on the cross was for you and for me. And that is why, because of all the sufferings, because of all that he endured for us, Paul calls it glory. Because God did it for us. Amazingly, the cross, which was a symbol of execution and death and suffering and everything, humiliation, everything, has become a symbol of life, the greatest symbol of life and victory and glory that will ever exist in humankind. And even past that, there will never be anything greater. And so to think that this has been done for me, when one considers for every one of us, God has done this. Now it frames this seeking of glory into a different perspective, does it not? Brothers and sisters, what need do we have to be in despair, despondency, especially for our young people when we hear about all these things about mental illness that exist very sadly in our country and in our world today? What need do we have to fall into any of these traps if we hold fast to the fact that all that God did was for each of us? It is a glory. We don't need to seek glory anywhere else. Because as St. Paul says, the only place I glory is in the cross of our Lord Jesus Christ. The cross of our Lord Jesus Christ. May we always remember this. May we adopt this always. And by the way, we will come to points in our life where we forget this and need to adopt it again. And that's fine, because God knows that. That's why it's something eternal. May we always have this close to our heart. May we always have this close in our minds. And whenever we think of these things about social status and accolades and being on a pedestal or whatever it might be, let us not seek glory anywhere other than as St. Paul instructed us today in the cross of our Lord. God bless you. Amen.